what our plan is tonight.
Yes. I want to thank you all for being here. I also want to show you my very official mic. I borrowed this from work, my full-time job, I should say. And I'm feeling very official on this and very excited to meet you guys. I know I've been emailing you back and forth for 10 weeks, so it's so fun to get you to see your Zoom squares here and get to lead you through this evening with Meg. So just thank you for being here. And I want to remind you first, before we dive into questions and things, that this meeting is being recorded. So if you prefer not to be on camera, eventually this will be posted on Meg's YouTube. We're very sophisticated for other readers to listen to and get to enjoy. And so if you would prefer not to be on camera for that, go ahead and turn your camera off on this, and that you won't appear on that YouTube. And then as we go, you all are doing a great job already. Please keep using the chat feature as we go. There will be opportunities for you to come off mute. Meg has some questions for you along the way, so we just can't wait to talk with you and get to hear about the book from both Meg and from you. So the way it's going to work, we love an agenda. So we have an agenda here for you. We've bucketed your questions that you've sent in into these buckets here. So we're going to start. The most popular question was about Meg's writing style. So we're going to let her kick it off with that. And then we'll go into more of the plot and Gemma. So we've got some character questions, some plot points, a lot on family dynamics and mental health, and then we'll end with some open discussion time. Any other questions that come up as you're listening, note those. We'll have some time at the end for those. We've got some final thoughts from Meg at the end, and then closing announcements for you, just sort of where we're headed as the Unravelers after Gemma's launch. So without further ado, yes, please keep using the chat. I will try to moderate that as much as possible too, to catch things in there along the way. But we're going to get started with Meg's writing process. So Meg, before we start on Gemma.
I'm gonna look at everybody. Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, look at everybody. No, please do. Take it in.
Like my hands are shaking. I never feel nervous ever, not even on stage, but I just feel so unbelievably grateful for you all because this has been a very emotional day. And often when you like bring the book out, I'm still admitting people, when you bring the book out, that's like then you get like nervous for how people are going to interpret it. And I don't feel that way because I just had such a beautiful soft landing with all of you all. And I just felt kind of, just in a hug the whole 2 months that you were with me. So thank you all. Okay, what were you saying, Katie? Where were we at? This is how mine and Katie's check-ins go. Yeah. Yeah, keep me on track.
Okay, so before we start on the book, just Gemma as a character and the book, we really want to know about you. So Emma had our first question, and she wants to know more about your writing process. So how did you come up with the idea for this book?
Okay, so I feel so weird talking about my writing process. Thank you. I feel very important that someone's asking me about my process. I will say it's very difficult to separate my writing process from my husband, from my relationship with Jim. And I have training in writing. I have a degree in creative writing. And I would say that training was very good. And I'm sure that I rely on that a little subconsciously, but in reality, I don't know that I think about that at a conscious level as much as I do just the relationship that I have with Jim, because how I write and how I wrote this book was it starts with an idea and I move from idea to outline. And then I have Jim sort of check in and kind of tell me what he thinks. And then that outline for this book in particular was just a sentence per chapter. Like or sentence or two per chapter. This is kind of what I want to have happen. And then I would devote, time to try to get a chapter done a day. And sometimes I'd get half a chapter and sometimes I'd get 2 or 3. It just kind of depended on the day and the girls and what else was going on. And then we have a home printer. So I would print it out and I'd stick it on this chair I have in my office. And I would wait for Jim at the end of the day to read. And he would read and he would give feedback. And then I would incorporate it the next day and keep going. And so I wrote very linearly that way, even though the book did have some puzzle pieces move. And I can get I got the full manuscript done in about 4 months, because I kind of rushed through that first draft. So then I can get to the collaborative piece where I send it to my agent, Claire, who I know is on the phone. Got her feedback, sent it to, get it to Jim, got his feedback. I really like the feedback portion of it. The idea for this book actually came from a single moment where somebody was in my home holding London as an infant and fell asleep in a chair without arms. And there wasn't tension in the room. It wasn't a familial thing. It was just a thing. And I grabbed her, and there was no issue. But the way that postpartum has come for me is the intrusive thoughts and the laying down at night and then playing back over that moment and going, yeah, but what if? What if she would have fallen? And I always wanted to tell sort of the story of postpartum and those emotions. And so I thought, well, that might work. So that's kind of the process. The process specifically with Gemma is kind of interesting because I had that experience and wrote the first draft in 2020 and sent it to my agent. And we went back and forth with Jim, and we tried to shop it and we didn't sell it. And so we shelved it. And I wound up writing an entirely different full novel. And about a year and a half ago, Jim said, I want you to pick it back up. And I said, I can't, I don't see it anymore. I can't, there were two pieces, and I'll get into them later tonight because I know what questions are coming, but there were two specific pieces of the novel that I couldn't make work. And so we printed out copies for each other, and we went back through it with a fine-tooth comb, and Jim got out note cards and wrote every piece of plot and every character and all of their characteristics, and we moved it around on the dining room table like a puzzle piece. And he had two suggestions that just, like, I think I heard clicking when he said them, and locked the book into place. But of course, then it took major rewrites because those two small suggestions touched every aspect of the book. And so that's how we got here. So in summary, I really think that for me, my favorite part is the community aspect, which is what this Unravelers have done for me, is just getting to be in conversation with Claire, my agent, or Jim. That's the best part. So the process to me is, how can I quickly get to the part where someone's giving me feedback on it? Even though I do like to be alone writing, that's my favorite part.
I love it. So the next one, I think we'll expand on this a bit. I'm wondering personally the community aspect, how it was different. But Allison asked, what surprised you most about yourself during the writing of this book compared to your nonfiction books?
Okay, so in nonfiction, I have a very clear idea of what I'm about to say and the point I'm trying to make, and I might sit there for a minute and think about different ways I want to do that. With the novel, and it was the first one I wrote, so I'm sure other people do it other ways, but for me, I would sit down at the desk with that one chapter, that one sentence, one or two sentences of, this is what I have to get to today. And it was a plot point. Calvin's got to fall. We got to go to the hospital. We got to, these things are happening. But once I started writing, it was really an anything goes situation, because I didn't necessarily know when I started the chapter, are we going to be asleep? Are we standing in a window? Are we awake? Are we upset? Are we hungry? What do we do? What's the character doing? And so I remember writing the chapter where she's in the hospital with Calvin, and I'm sitting there writing, and I'm like, oh, Gemma, oh, no. Oh, this bitch is gonna lie. And she lies to Anthony. And I know I'm in full control, but I was like, oh, sweetie, oh God, okay, all right. So she's gonna lie. So then, Jim gets home, and he doesn't like me to watch him read, but I always do anyway. And so I'm pretending to work, and I'm watching him, and he looks up and he says, Gemma lies. And I was like, I know, I don't know what she's doing. I don't literally know what she's thinking. So there was like real distancing that happened with writing the novel because it's like you sort of become this character, and you're living through her and you're like, what would she naturally do next? Oh my God, she's gonna lie. So what was fun about hearing you all be frustrated at Gemma? Yeah, she pissed me off too. And there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. Okay. I tried and I was just like, this is what she has to do. So that really surprised me because I guess I thought as a novelist, you would sit down and I don't know what you were doing, know what you were writing. Because with nonfiction, I will ruminate so long before I write that it just sort of pours out. But with this, I just was sort of following Gemma along and all the silly and beautiful things that she did while she was unraveling. So yeah, that's what surprised me the most, I think.
I love it. And I think a lot of us felt those things. You could see in the chat, a lot of us having that same reaction to the live, feeling those things like, oh, she did it. And it makes me excited for our next section. We have one left in writing, but I think there's a lot of questions around those motivations of characters and how they drove the plot and how you sort of followed them. So I'm excited to get there when we get there. But last on this section, so Era wants to know, you do a lot. We all know that. So how do you juggle creative pursuits like writing a book while also keeping up with your full-time job, keeping up with your family, balancing all of that?
I heard Tina Fey once say in an interview that when people ask her that, she thinks what they're actually saying is you're just about to mess everything up, aren't you? You're neglecting something. It's a fair question. I love the question. I love Era. I think it's not that I wish we asked women writers this less. It's that I wish we asked male writers this more. Um, I'm 41, so I'm of the era in high school where so much of our writing or so much of our reading that we had at the time was very male centric. Like I think about like reading Hemingway and Great Gatsby and all of these things. And then when I get into college and I study writing and English literature, at the time I was really into Jonathan Franzen, which is a hard guy to be into because he he only has a novel like every 15 years. So you really kind of have to be devoted. But anyway, I read an article from him in college where he said his writing, the way that he wrote was he had a cabin and he would go to this cabin and the cabin didn't have electricity and he would just write for months on end. I guess just shitting in a bucket and writing, like whatever. The idea is that men would go away and isolate, right? Like that they do this in solitude. Like we have these iconic ideas of men writing in solitude. Clearly, if they have kids, whatever, many of them alcoholics, a lot of like the damaged, I don't know, that sense of like the lone writer. And I think like what iconic women do we have that we see that are writers? And the only one I could think of earlier today was like Sarah Jessica Parker at her little computer, all alone in her apartment, in her tutu. And I think to be a good writer, you have to be an observer. So that as I started to get older and realize most of what I was writing about were these experiences I was having with my kids or these experiences I was having in motherhood and working and all of these things, how could you go isolate yourself when so much of your writing has to be the fodder that you're seeing on a daily basis? So that didn't really make sense to me as I got older and realized that was actually extremely selfish and also not that interesting to go be isolated because I don't think of it as a compartmentalized aspect of my life. And I have two doors in this office. This is an old extended like porch that it's been converted at some point in the past. And so I write and a child comes in and a child goes out and a dog comes in and a husband goes out. And it's all the time because that's just life. And so it's when I get asked, how do I juggle it all? It's this, my snarky response is, how do you juggle brushing your teeth? Like it is just one of those things that I can't not do because it's the only way I can process life. So I think the juggling part is just recognizing it's sort of this braided, blended part of who I am. But I'd also give credit again to Jim because when we did Hairbrained like 10, 11 years ago and published that ourselves, that just wasn't done. That it about 3 or 4 years later, then that was really kind of the cusp of like people self-publishing. But Jim was like, we're gonna do this ourselves and we're gonna take it super seriously. And so from the beginning of this career for me, or this part of my career for me, Jim has insisted that we treat it as serious as anything else. So it's not a hobby. Mom doesn't need time to go, do her hobby. This is something that is serious, and I care about it. And so I think that helps too, to like the kids see it that way. I see it that way. We don't talk about it in a way that it's like, oh, I have to go play golf or whatever. So yeah, I probably am messing something up. I often, my entire existence is walking around thinking I've forgotten something. So that's probably my answer. The quiet or the brief answer is, yeah, I'm probably forgetting something. But I juggle it all because I have a really good support system in Jim and the girls too. My daughter, I don't know if I see her. She's probably on a different screen. Hang on, babe. Are you there? There she is. My gorgeous daughter, Lowry, is joining us. I don't know if London's on. Lowry's been hard at work making you all bracelets, and just the coolest thing to get to experience this with her, with both of them.
Yes. So, Meg, I don't know if you've gotten to look at the chat, but Emma said something. She said, I love the reframing of embracing the chaos of life rather than struggling against it in your answer. I think, yes. And I think that's something that also Gemma was learning along the way. We all got to do that with her. And so I want to hand it over to you to ask the group, the Unravelers, our first question to them.
Yes. Okay, so I do this thing with my classes. They're much, much smaller than this, which I take great offense to. But I have a question in the chat for you all, although if you want to come on, you can come on the microphone as well. But even though I got frustrated at Gemma while writing her, again, I couldn't intervene at all. We put the book out on NetGalley, which is how you all accessed it. But before you all got access to it, it was already out there for other people to have access to. And the very first review that came back, like day one, I don't know how people read this fast. I think the first line was, "Oh my God, I hate Gemma." And I mean, it was 5 out of 5. Love the book, hate Gemma. And I voice memoed Katie in a panic. And I was like, I think we have a problem. Do people hate Gemma? And I loved and was surprised by how, I don't even know if I'd call it controversial, but just the very nuanced way that people felt about this woman, which was very meta, right? Because like, how judged do we all feel while we're doing anything, let alone while we're unraveling? And here we are sort of judging. So my question for the chat is, how do you feel about Gemma? What was your takeaway? Because I felt like 50% of you were like, she's my girl, and 50% of you were like, I would bitch slap her so hard if she were a friend of mine. And while you're putting in the chat, we all have Gemma.
Mm-hmm.
Katie brought me a little champagne before tonight, so I'm going to open my little champagne.
Stop it. I have my little glass here. Yes, Erin, I see you. Cheers.
Sarah Darby coming in hot. How do you stand being my friend, Sarah? I feel like I've got some Gemma tendencies. I wanted people to realize she needed help. Depends on the chapter. Oh, Katie, this is like a...
Oh, sorry.
No, it's good. I just
didn't come with
no, it's a twist. I thought I was going to have to like pop a cork.
Oh, Abby, I reverse fell in love with Gemma. I feel that.
Reverse?
Yeah.
She was so real. That's what makes her so annoying. Is she making the best?
Yes, Tracy, I would bitch slap her and then hug her and buy her a cocktail. Yeah, it's like one of your best friends where you're like, you're making bad choices, but yeah, you're doing great.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think too, like, so much of the work, and I talked about this a little bit on Instagram, but so much of the work in writing this was making sure you never left Gemma's head. And so I had to work really hard with Jim's counsel and of course the editors of the publishing house to not head hop, which is any situation where Gemma is sort of assuming someone's feeling something, or so she can't walk in the room and say Anthony looked upset or Anthony was upset, right? Because we don't know what Anthony was. So we had to just get really, really into Gemma's head. And so when we think about our friends, all of us are probably this annoying as she is. We're just not in their head too. So it was interesting to watch you all have this reaction to her, because I think that I was like, damn, I'll never tell them my thoughts, because or what a people pleaser I can be sometimes. We
Hmm.
fell into meeting Jim on one of the worst days of our life. Mm,
These are so fun.
these are great. Um, and this saves, right? And when we record, it saves
Yeah.
the chat. Okay,
I
good.
think we'll have them. Yeah, so as you keep reading those, so first on characters, Tracy would like to know about your character development process overall. So how did you develop the character of Gemma, and then each of her family members, her individual relationships with them, and then this piece that I kind of teased at earlier, how did they inform the plot or vice versa?
Okay, so how did I develop the Gemma, all the characters, and then did they inform the plot? Okay, so I will say I started with plot first, which probably is an interesting approach when the emotional core was way more important and the bigger overarching issue. But to me, I think I had to kind of know where I was going, so the outline really mattered. So I did the outline, and then I get into Gemma's head, and I'm writing, and now Gemma's lying. And so I have this character who's lying to her husband, and Anthony at this point is just a stand-in husband. I don't really know. We need a husband. I want some siblings. I just sort of had these almost archetypes sort of in place. So Gemma lies. Again, there's nothing we can do about it. And I have to understand how Anthony's going to respond. What kind of man is Anthony, and what is his motivation, and how might he react? And in an early iteration of the book, my agent was like, I don't think this is how Anthony would react in this particular space. It was not the lie, but a different space. And so, early on, I had Anthony too nice, and then I made him too mean. And so, I mean, you just are sort of playing, but as you start to shape those characters, then the plot naturally started to change. So for a long time, you're just sort of going like this between plot and character, trying to get everything back level. Um, and I think too, you can't really have relationships in a vacuum. So whatever relationship is happening between Gemma and Anthony suddenly changes even how we're going to interact with Calvin and all of that. So that they informed plot in the sense that I was just kind of going in a circle back and forth. Gemma was way, way, way snarkier in the early editions of it. You would have not liked her, and so there, everyone kind of had to go on a sand people down a little bit. But yeah, I think that kind of coming up with those dynamics and thinking about the way that they would interact, um, you're having to think about there's one overarching conflict, and then every character that gets introduced has to have its own arc too. There has to either be growth for every character, or you've got to have I wasn't doing like a Breaking Bad situation where the character's actually going to regress in some way. But I just wanted there to be an element of change or growth with every character while in service to the bigger plot. So it was, I guess the metaphor that's coming to mind is when you're trying to get egg whites out and you're just like going like this back and forth between plot and character. So yes, I don't know. I remember Gemma Sinclair just was a name. And a lot of people have asked, like, did you know what they look like? Did you have like an actor in mind? Nope. That would have been really helpful or maybe hurtful. I'm not sure. But that's as soon as you start to develop characteristics, you start, writing them down and making sure you're being like consistent. And but I never saw, like, people have asked before, like, who should play Gemma? I don't know. Like we'll talk about that in a little bit later, but I don't know who should play Gemma. That's a great question. So
Yeah, tell us in the chat if you have ideas. I have an
Yeah.
idea I'll share later. But before we keep talking about Gemma, we've got a character that was a big hit with people, Dr. Fox. So we want to know about the character. We want to know, how did you develop that? Was there research involved? She was very realistic, a lot of people said. And so tell us all things Dr. Fox,
All things
please.
Dr. Fox. A young Melissa McCarthy. Yeah, if we could just like make different ages of people that I have in mind, that would be great. I love Dr. Fox with my whole heart, and it was the most fun and the character I earned the most. And I say that because starting out, the archetype for Dr. Fox was expert. I wanted a expert, and so she was not Dr. Fox. I don't even remember what her name was in the first iteration, but she was a man. And she was a grumpy man and older and sort of this, Jim will love this reference, but sort of like a Yoda. And I thought I wanted this contrast between like the fledgling woman a little bit earlier in her career and then the sort of advisor, I suppose, or somebody that could come in. And it was not working how I wanted it to work. And I had to reflect on the fact that the majority of my advising, I didn't have a single female professor in my writing program in college. My professor, my dissertation chair was a man doing my PhD. I got some really bad counsel from men, frankly. And I had inadvertently put that in this book where I was thinking of expert and my head went to men, and it was showing up in a really uncomfortable way because it wasn't super I don't know, it just came across as like, oh, this is not this is gross or something. Like there's something about it that just wasn't, it was much more let me tell you what's going on with your life. So when we were sitting there and we were moving around the pieces on the dining room table, Jim said, I'm gonna throw this out there. I think maybe the therapist could be a girl, could be a woman. He did not say girl. I want to correct that. He did not say girl. Um, wouldn't that be fun? Like 10-year-old girl. And when he said it, it wasn't quite angels, but I was like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? First of all, that I couldn't see that. But once he said woman, everything changed because suddenly it wasn't expert. It was a collaborator. It was somebody who was vulnerable. It was somebody who was funny. It was somebody who was softer. It was somebody who could be playful with Gemma. Gemma didn't need to be taught. Gemma needed to be witnessed. And I think that it's a little bit of healing for Meg in full transparency. So getting Dr. Fox to who she was took some breaking down of my own beliefs about mentorship and when we think of, I mean, that's just pretty common in media that it's the grumpy old professor or whatever. So I had to kind of get over that. I think you asked a question about research and to get those conversations right. Am I doing okay? Is this like, are we okay? To get this I never talk this much in class, so I'm just like hyper aware that I'm talking a lot. To get those conversations right, I had to make sure of what was going to happen. I would say off screen. I don't mean off screen, but like not in the room, to where we weren't showing up in the room and then Dr. Fox is saying, here's what's the thing, here's what's wrong. Like she had to go do some self-discovery. And so sort of getting those conversations right was really important. I would sound out those pieces of dialogue to make sure that the cadence was right, to make sure this is how people talk. But I think the question I've gotten the most is that how could you possibly do that without experiencing this yourself? Or did I shadow a therapist for a week or whatever? So I think one thing that isn't very clear about my career, or is invisible maybe about my career, is that the majority of my day is spent talking one-on-one with people in the middle of anxiety. So that started with students. So I might spend 4 to 5 to 6 hours a day in one-on-one sessions or meetings with students. And no one's really coming to me to talk about what classes they take. They're coming to me because They may have a career issue, or in many, many cases in higher ed, extremely coming to me to talk about what classes they take. They're coming to me because they may have a career issue, or in many, many cases in higher ed, extreme mental health crises. I mean, get medical intervention in my office crises. So, and you're completely unprepared as a faculty member to deal with that. And so I just found myself in this situation where I was having these conversations with students that were bigger than school. It was bigger than my career, right? It was really emotional one-on-one conversation. So I have a lot of experience with that, but I was feeling very under trained for that. And so, because it wasn't just students, students sometimes would be like, you need to talk to my friend or you need to talk to my coworker. And all of a sudden I was just sort of having this weird experience with, or not weird, wonderful experience of people like calling me up and wanting to talk, which is great, but like I don't have any training. I just like to gab. Uh, so I went back to school maybe 7 years ago to Columbia and did a certification in coaching, and it was super intense, and it was one of the best educational experiences I've had. But it's completely simulation, so you're in a cohort of about 25 with Columbia professors, psychoanalysts, other coaches, and they're training you on how to do this. And so it gave me skills in that area, but it also exposed me to what these people do that might be more on the therapy side or might be more on the psychoanalyst side. And then I also had to have peer-to-peer coaching and therapy as part of that because you can't, therapists have to have a therapist, coaches have to be coached, that kind of thing. So I've had a pretty extensive, just personal experience in a room talking about, my mom or talking about my work or So I think those came from all of that. I wouldn't say I sat down and was like, what is projection? But I know it just from those experiences. So I'm glad that everyone, I don't know everybody, but I'm glad that you all jived with Dr. Fox because I just don't we all need a Dr. Fox in our life? How privileged was Gemma to have Dr. Fox? But yeah, I love her. And so everyone's like, "Will we see Gemma again?" I'm like, "I don't know. What about Dr. Fox? What about what about Dr. Fox on a road trip? I don't know. I think she'd be really fun."
Yeah. I mean, I can't wait for you to read some of these chats back, but it
Oh
sounds
yeah.
like if you write about Dr. Fox, it's going to have to be a little autobiography because you are our Dr. Fox for a lot of us. So we can feel the research and the realisticness of
Well,
her
and let
character.
me enter because I see some students in here. I do not think that I am like I am very humbled when people come to me. I'm not, I hope that I'm not giving the impression that like, come on, come on, students, tell me your everything. But I am here for it. I do like the
No, we're seeking
tea.
you out.
Ah,
Okay, let's give you a little break, get back in the chat. You've got another question for our unravelers.
okay. So in thinking about the fact of a novel having an inciting incident that makes the book start, right? Any inciting incident is the dropping of Calvin. So what do you think would have naturally happened if Calvin had never been dropped? Where would where would Gemma be? What would happen? I don't think the truth would have been it would have come to a head eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, something
The
else that the
unraveling would have
writer might
happened.
have said. Hmm.
She would be no, I don't want to reveal that because that's kind of where I think I might be going with number three. But the images and flashbacks would have led her to seek help, surely.
Either way, he's getting punched.
That man needed knuckles. Would still be seeking his approval. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think like for me, like that the inciting incident was having the kids and like because you really do have to come to terms with how you were parented and how you want to parent. And that's kind of the story that I was trying to tell. And like you have to overcome your anger and or admiration or both. Oh, I'm burping now because I got some bubbles in me for what your own parents did. And I think Yeah, I think Gemma would have probably snapped in a maybe less productive way. Um, Beaver Dream. These are good.
Yes, they are. Yeah, so thinking on this Eddie piece, because the catalyst is him dropping Calvin, but then we kind of see all of this come together with the story of him hitting the transformer. So weave, how did you make all of those plot points come together with that one incident?
Not well and over five versions of the book. Um, I felt like so the feedback we got from the first round of trying to sell the book was it's not quite there. Like there's something that's not quite making this externally have as much tension as there is internally. And so I mean, it truly did take what, 4 rounds to get that right. And it took Jim really piecing, making us put it out like a puzzle piece and thinking of how we can um, draw it all together because that's very crucial to the theme of unraveling to where you untangle it and then you can stitch yourself back together. So they did have to be connected, but I would just say it was messy as hell. Like it wasn't to me, even though I started with plot, is I think the hardest part is like, what are we gonna do now? And I would read books. Like, has anyone read Song of Achilles? It's so good. But man, you're reading that book and they move 17 years in a sentence. And I felt like I couldn't get Gemma to the front door without a paragraph. Like I couldn't figure out how to like move things. Like that was really challenging for me. And so trying to like know when to speed up and slow down and bring things together was the harder part than the emotional re resonance or the dialogue. So it's a sloppy answer because it was a sloppy way that we got there. But again, I can't give enough in this feminist novel. I can't give enough credit to my male husband here, because without him, what would I be? But I do credit him a lot because I think that he could have stayed out of that emotional piece of it and kind of help look at the larger part of the him and my agent and beta readers and editors and it's really just a matter of listening to a lot of people and looking at it in a better way. But man, when it did come together, it was like, oh, this is a bad metaphor, but it's the one that came in my head. Diarrhea, it was like, oh, we better catch it. This is happening in a really beautiful way. So yeah.
Sorry, I was getting in there on the chat on
Yeah,
the
to get
diarrhea.
to the poop. I'm
So
not
I want
obsessed with it, but I am very curious about poop, and I think that's fair.
Um, so thinking on that emotional piece, because yes, I think we all felt, I can say when I was reading it, when she's having that discussion with her sister and she realizes that the transformer being hit caused this experience for her sister as well. I think that's where the pieces started to click for us. So I will say on behalf of all of us, thank you for that work to get those pieces together because it was very satisfying reading that and seeing all the siblings' experiences come together in that way.
And
But I
isn't
want to
that
go, yeah,
isn't
go
that
ahead.
true of all of our families?
Mhm.
Where me and my siblings have three very different what's the blind man touching the elephant? We all have three very different images of the same elephant or the same. And so I think there can be a vacation that, oh, I thought that was a fun vacation. You didn't like it? No,
Mhm.
I was, and I think that was really important to tell that story of we can all experience something and it doesn't feel the same to everybody. And I really felt that about parenting where um, it was this super universal experience, but I had nuance with it. And, you're going to love your baby the minute it comes out. Like there were all these things about it where this is how you're supposed to experience it. So, Yes. Okay. I'm done. Interjection there, but yes, I think that
No, keep
people just
going.
experiencing different parts of the elephant.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to get back to Amy's very important point that Eddie needed to get punched.
Right.
He was going to get punched. So tell us about that. It was really surprising, I think, to some of us. Some others of us were like, oh, thank goodness that needed to happen. So how did that come to be?
Yeah, Eddie had to get punched. Eddie was punched. That, I mean, if there was a plot point I wrote down first, I think it might have been that Eddie had to get some knuckles on him. Originally, Eddie was not punched by Gemma, and he was punched at a much different spot in the book. And so when I said there were two pieces that clicked into place that Jim and I really went after in this last major rewrite. One was the changing of Dr. Fox, and one was that Gemma's having to have conflict. Gemma is having to confront. And it was a head bashing that got him there, and it had to be a head bashing that got him out, right? We had to have this sort of like pugilist repeat of this guy's poor head getting punched. So in the same evening that he says, I think you might consider making the therapist a woman, uh, he looked up at a certain point and said these three words, Gemma punches Eddie. And for days after, I'd wake up in the morning and go, Gemma punches Eddie. And he's like, Gemma punches Eddie. And it was just this like thing that we said about this is it. We figured it out. Now, it's all fine for him to say that because he doesn't have to do the rewrites. But I mean, that took going through every inch of the book and changing so much of the plot to get to the point where, toward the end of the book, that as a resolution, that Gemma punches Eddie. So I think that is this thing of like it needed to be in there, but it needed to be Gemma, and it was a very clear case. Again, I had to do a lot of self reflection through writing this. Gemma didn't punch Eddie in the original draft because Meg wouldn't have punched Eddie, and I forgot sometimes who was who, which I think would probably be pretty common for any writer. But there were moments where I was like kind of judgy of her, and so I would sort of that was one instance where I was like, she wouldn't do this. And so once he said Gemma punches Eddie, it also gave me a lot more clarity about Gemma as a character too. And for me to stop judging her. You all kept judging her, but I had to stop judging her because she had to punch him, you know? It is one of my favorite scenes in the book though, of her the pacing and the rain and her raw and vengeful fist was very fun to write. And I don't know, I'm not suggesting that we'd solve all of our problems with violence, but I do, I mean, it worked in this case. So that's something for you.
Yeah, I imagine the rain scene is like Gemma's vengeful version of like the notebook scene where she's writing to him. She's like, I wrote you letters every day. And she's just like, you were a problem my whole life, punch.
Oh, Katie,
You got to
yeah.
get it out.
And if we could get Rachel McAdams to play Gemma like that, I mean,
So I
she's
want
also
to talk
too old
about,
now. This feels bad. This feels I can't do this. We'll let Spielberg pick it, but
so I want to talk about one more male character in Gemma's life. And Camille has our question here. So she says, I was pleasantly surprised that we got an insight into Jack's experience of fatherhood when you've written thus far so vividly about Gemma's experience with motherhood. So the question is, what made you decide to focus on Jack's unraveling and unfolding as the final piece of the story? Did you ever consider using her mom to do that?
I love this. There's no way to answer. Like, I love this question, Camille. No, I didn't consider it, not because I didn't consider it. This is a hard question to answer. It had to be Jack. So, I think you have to care about symmetry in the book, but I think you have to care more about balance. And so it wasn't necessarily a story I was trying to tell about women wholly. It was a story I was trying to tell about the dynamics of a family shape the individual. And so Gemma can't have a relationship with Irene that isn't impacted by Jack. And she can't have a relationship with Mary or Eddie that isn't impacted by Mary or Eddie or Jack or Irene. And it's like we all have these situations in our families where we don't have sort of vacuum dynamics. So I think that writing the mother-daughter relationship being so deeply affected by the father-son relationship and the mother-son and the father-daughter, making sure those were kind of talking to each other was more important to have that happen. Further, just logistically, Jack also had to grow, and what I think the story here is Gemma has the kind of parents that maybe many of us do that are from a certain age demographic where it's all about oh, what's the phrase? Dishonest harmony and repression and just go along and super gender dynamics. So super gendered. So when they show up on the scene, Jack naturally is going to go be the hero and clean out the beer cans and save and talk to the cops while the mother stays and nurtures and is with Gemma and is nurturing her. And what Jack does over here that he perceives as so heroic is the downfall of the whole family. And the mother is over here going, everything's fine, everything's fine. Oh my gosh, you know. And I think that's a dynamic that we see a lot in like a boomer, you know, I hate to sort of label it like that, but in that generation where that was just much more common. And so I just really wanted to play out the ways in which we are continually giving the blame to the mothers while often, maybe always, the influence of the father is so strong, whether they're absent, whether they're involved, whether they're that they're sometimes messing stuff up. And I don't mean that I'm not trying to be anti-male when I say that. I just mean that there's a situation here where um, you know, in my own life, uh, we sort of centered the father figure. And bless Jim, we barely notice him in the house. I mean, he is not, we don't even ask him how he's doing. That is none of our concern, nor do we care. So to sort of decenter a father figure is, I just wanted to play up that. But I love, I love this. I love this question because it does say to me that that mother theme felt strong, which is good. But beyond that, it's the parent theme too. So thank you, Camille.
Yes, thank you. And justice for Jim, Lauren. So I want to flip this. I want to keep going on the family dynamics, and I want you all to have a chance to give a little bit about how the family dynamics affected you to Meg. So she's got your next question.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people were experiencing. I think the book brought up some shit for you all. I would suspect. So if you're willing to put it in the chat, I'd love to know sort of what did those family dynamics, family or marriage, what did it? Yeah, just put it in the chat, which we're gonna save. What did it bring up for you all? Obviously, I need to punch my older sister. Again, I don't know that we want to take life advice from Gemma, but yeah, it made me so glad I go to therapy. Love it. Love it. And it's totally fine if this is a personal question that you're um, not going to tell me, but
Yeah, what didn't it bring up? I don't think Camille would mind us sharing when she finished. She said, "Did I finish the book or did the book finish me?"
best quote. Eddie and his wife were surprising. Certain paths I'm going down.
Mhm.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
that
I'm
one.
just saying yeah, and you don't know what I'm saying yeah to. All of it, just
Hmm.
all of it. Um,
Yeah, these are so good. Thank you all for sharing these.
hmm. Ooh, Alfre Woodard. I will tell you now that the book is done. And I promise you this was not in my head before, but if any of you all know the comedian Tig Notaro, she is who I see now that Dr. Fox is written. I'm like, I would love because she just has that
Mhm.
slow quirkiness about her. But someone said Catherine Hahn, and I'm like, yes, get Meryl on the phone. Yeah, the
Catherine
dishonest.
Hahn, I can't help but think about How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, where she's the fake therapist for her friend. And so that's cracking me up thinking of her in that light.
Yeah, that's funny. Meryl is the mom. Yeah,
Oh,
that could be good.
we're star-studded.
Tig is close to what I imagined. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about yet another complex relationship that Gemma had. There was a bit of talk earlier about her husband, Anthony. A lot of discussion in the chat about whether he was pushed away or whether he left on his own. And so I would just want to talk more with you, Meg, about how their dynamic evolved. And then were there specific turning points in their marriage that were hard to write as you were developing that plotline?
Yeah, so the marriage was hard in the sense that one, I had to make sure I wasn't projecting my own. Two, I had to figure out the role that Anthony was playing because again, at first he was too heroic and then after that he was mean. I don't know. I kind of was worried about that until I realized Anthony actually has to go away. And so getting that separation where he leaves was harder to figure out than their actual dynamic because he had to leave. And I can't remember what Unraveler said this, but they were like, I kind of forgot about Anthony in the best way. And then he came back. It was like, yeah, you kind of had to let Gemma be one, you had to have some leverage, like her marriage is falling apart, so it's the stakes are high. But he also needed to play I guess it just needed to be more about her journey and how her journey affected the marriage than their marriage and how their marriage affected the journey. And so she kind of they had to kind of separate for stakes and for that to happen. So I think it was just kind of it was harder more in plot than anything else to kind of figure out when to let him go and when to bring him back and how, in some iterations she kicks him out and other iterations he leaves. And so it was just finding that. I'm very pleased with how it ultimately happened because again, the more that I just like got into these characters and let them guide me, the kind of better that always went. But I kind of had my own judgments about like oh, I don't want Gemma to be in this marriage. And then, oh, I don't want it to be so bad. That's not this story here. This story is not about their marriage. So, yeah, I think that was kind of the hard part. But I didn't have hard parts in terms of like, um, I wasn't projecting me and Jim on there. That I consciously remember. Maybe Jim, again, I don't ask him much, but maybe he felt that way sometimes. But um, yeah, that piece was. All of those folks to Gemma took their took their took their effort, I guess is how I'd say that.
Yeah. So our last question in this family dynamics character piece comes from Victoria. Um, a really good question about a specific analogy that you use. You use this analogy of locking the doors, and sort of these check-ins that we have with our family. So she just asked, can you expand on that? Would love to know more about how that came to be in the book.
Yeah, so the locking the doors analogy about this idea that we're kind of constantly feeling like we're doing a favor for our parents. So I tried to think of different aspects that either I've felt or I've heard students or clients bring up of their own family dynamics, and I just this idea that comes up so much with almost everybody that I talk to is the expectations that our parents have on us. Um, And Lowry, I think you're doing great. I saw the side eye. I think you're doing great. I have no notes, babe. But I think that there's a situation there where we're trying to like please our family, and it feels like we're doing them a favor. And so, do we steer really hard into that and we live this life that they want, which is what Eddie was trying so hard to do, that he was banging his head against a wall, metaphorically and physically. Um, and so I was just thinking it would be great to for that to be the story between all of them, obviously, but that was really the story for Eddie and his father. And I think part of this question too is the checking in with your spouses. Like, did you or anyone? Did you lock the doors? Did you do that? Pretty long into our marriage, I caught Jim checking my hair straightener. And this really pissed me off because I am of sound body and mind and I know how to turn my straightener off. Thank you very much. And then one day I forgot to turn the straightener off and I called him and I said, I forgot to turn the straightener off. And he goes, no, I checked it. I turned it off. And I said, okay, new deal. You check it every day, but don't you ever let me know you're checking it. So that's sort of the balance we strike of um, that straightener is going to get left on. Why these things don't have automatic offs is beyond me. It is beyond me. But so I think there's this level of like knowing the checking in versus you're doing me, you're not trusting me is also at the root of this idea of trust. That can we trust our kids to live their lives how they want to live without, giving them too high of expectations. So yeah, that's kind of how that came to be. I'm glad that spoke to you.
Okay, let's move into the last official category and then we'll open up the floor to questions. We're going to talk about mental health and aspects of postpartum. And so, Meg, I'll turn it over to you for the last question to the group.
Yes. How are your bowel movements? No? Okay. What did you, I'm not claiming that everybody on this call is a mother or even female or even has a uterus. But one part that was really important to me was that physical recovery, not just the depression piece. So, so many people that have read this have now openly told me how long they waited to poop after birth. And I just had a former student who just had a baby, and she texted me and said, just letting you know, I only waited 24 hours and I got that out of there. So I really feel like I'm doing a PSA. But I'm just curious in the chat, what what was your physical thing? What was your funny story? What was the thing that bothered you the most? Like what that you didn't talk about, that you didn't say. And if you don't have kids, um, you can just sit and watch stool softener, screaming holy shit. You don't get an epidural for the poop, and it's way harder. Last, oh, yeah, breastfeeding destroyed me for a while.
Which
Yeah,
I love that you talked about that with Gemma too, the breastfeeding that she tried with the first and didn't for the second, and that was what was right for her. I think that is something I hear about a lot.
we've all done that roll off the bed. Okay, we've all done it. Um, Many of you follow me obviously on Instagram, and a year or two ago, um, I put up if you all flush tampons, and that became one of the most eye-opening things that we just don't talk about. Talk about this because 50% of you are like, oh, I flush them every day. I flush six or seven just for the hell of it. And the rest of you were like, I would never let a tampon near the toilet. So I'm just saying, men are trying to keep us from talking about this. So I just wanted to justice for bias. You always flushed. Madison, you're about to get so, you know what? You all attack her because you all have attacked me long enough. But no. Sleep deprivation, navigating intense life choices. Um, yeah, it's like you have the knowledge now. If I could have a baby now, I wouldn't see that baby for the first 6 months. Like that, somebody else would have that baby. I'd be like, I'll check in, you know. it would be very much like royalty, like hand me the baby at night and then, off she goes. Lowry, again, you were a dream and I loved having you. Um, just the worry. So much worry. Yeah.
Yeah, so as I'm reading these, you don't shy away from any of this in the book and telling Gemma's experience. Why was that important to you as a storyteller and telling Gemma's story?
I think I think there is like this universal experience of women who choose to have children that is so universalized that we don't ask about the nuances of it. Or we ask about the nuances of it about the baby. What are you feeding the baby? Is the baby sleeping? We don't give any care. We know, at least in this country too, we don't give any care to how women are experiencing it. And so the other part is we sort of have this dichotomous way of talking about motherhood. So you're either breastfeeding or you're not. You're either co-sleeping or you're not, or whatever the all the controversial stuff was. So I think there's also this level of you either had diagnosed postpartum depression or you were blissful. Like you didn't, what if you just felt in between? What if you just found the whole thing overwhelming? What if it just, like for me, I clearly had a simmering level of anxiety that just was waiting for something to make it pop, and kids were that, and so it was very scary to suddenly be that anxious and that depressed with a baby. And I think that there just wasn't, you're either depressed or you're not, is was my experience. Now that was 14 years ago. Maybe it's gotten better. Maybe it's gotten better for people, but it just felt like, oh, did you have postpartum depression? No, so you're good. And that doesn't feel right either. There just wasn't space to sort of be whatever the hell those first, 6 months are, or 10 years, however, whatever it was for you. So yeah, that was important. And then also I just wanted to talk about blood. I really did. I don't see it. And I know we laugh about, oh, in the show 24, they never go to the bathroom. Yeah, well, you know what else they don't do? They don't change tampons. And we're just like, that is so, it's crazy to me how we don't even address it ever. And I wanted the challenge of writing about cleaning up blood. And I even writing it, I was like, oh, is this too much? And that feels weird to be like, oh, is this, because there was a lot more blood in early iterations. And so I think like thinking about even my own hedging is indicative of how people perceive that. So
Yeah. So what do you, I mean, a lot of these things that people are already taking away from this and identifying with their own postpartum experience, but what do you hope that readers take away from that discussion on maternal mental health and postpartum?
um, I suppose I want people to feel, I suppose I want people to see Gemma and feel seen by Gemma. Because I think it's an invisible feeling to be a woman in general, and it's really invisible to be a mom because you think people are watching you, but they're looking at your baby, and then your baby gets older, and then people just stop looking at you altogether. And that's just physically, right? Like that's just like they may not even notice your existence, right? But then to know that these feelings we have are so visceral and so life-changing, and that birth, even when it goes great, is still super traumatic and transformative. And by traumatic, I do mean transformative. I don't um so I just hope people feel some sense of being seen. Um because I didn't when I through the early years. I didn't. I do now because you're looking at me right now, but I do feel much relief reading it and having the reaction that the Unravelers did about it, because it's like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like this was the experience, right? We all army roll off the bed, right? Like this is something that we're all doing. We're all folding the toilet paper like this, and we all are all flushing or not flushing tampons violently. Um, so yeah, I hope that everyone feels seen, and that it gets really like normal to, that it doesn't have to be all the way to depression to seek therapy or to seek help. It doesn't have to be all the way to to, you know, 11 for you to get um you could start your own unraveling, I guess.
Yeah, I think you reading through these again made a lot of us feel seen, and I can only imagine that that's going to continue happening as she's out there in the world. Gemma's out there for others to be experiencing and to be seen through that experience. So